عشق یعنی تپش این دل بارانی من، لطف پیدای تو و گریه پنهانی من.
Hello and Salaam Alaikum. Welcome to Zaidi'S podcast, episode 1, where we will be having a discussion on the ongoing Palestinian and Israel issue. Today with us we have Nazim Abbas Zaidi, currently living in Würzburg, Germany. He's a postgraduate of neuroscience. He has been involved in human rights activities for many years with a particular focus on Palestinian cause and issues related to Africans and African Americans. Thank you for joining.
Wa alaikum assalam. Thank you for having me on as your first guest and taking this very beautiful initiative in order to fulfill the importance of spreading information and awareness about this issue, because in this whole world, in the world of information that we live in, we also live in a world of disinformation, and it's important for us to spread the right word and look at the sources that we use to understand the situations and the problems and the issues that go around the world. And happy to answer and be a part of this discussion.
Yeah, so as you mentioned that this world is filled with misinformation and propaganda, and after October 7th we have heard many propaganda and many rumors, and we have heard many things from the Israel side and from the other side, that various other news and various other rumors and with various other misinformation. So before we actually get into the main issue which is currently going on, which happened after October 7th, let's first try to understand from your viewpoint what exactly led to the actual event of October 7th. Like, what exactly is the history behind it, and why? What was the reason that the Hamas took this initiative and took such a big step?
Good question, because as every single time that this happens, we always try, and the Western media and the narrative that goes around the world always tries to start the discussions about this issue always when there is a retaliation or any kind of attack or provocation, if you want to call it, from the Palestinian side, be it the Hamas or be it the people's revolting or be it the Palestinian Jihad. But it's always important that we do not start from the 7th of October, because that's not where it started from.
Definitely.
And it's easy to pick and choose where to start from, because this region, because of its extreme rich resources and extreme diversity in resources and rich resources, it has always attracted international interests in it. So it has always been occupied, or always has been a part of some kind of occupation or rule throughout its history.
Yeah.
So every time people go back, people always get confused that where do we start from if we look at this history? Do we go back all the way to Abraham, or do we start from the Babylonian period, or do we start from the Roman period, or do we start from the Islamic expansion, from the Ottoman? And that makes it easy, because like for the Western media, because of the complicated history and the long history of this region, they always start from a position where they can easily like create or misguide their own narrative so that the people can side with them.
Yeah.
But in order to understand specifically the current situation, I will mention this before going into the history, that irrespective of what the history of the situation is, or history of the land is, what's happening today and what has been happening in Palestine for the last 75 years irrespective of what the history is, killing of thousands and hundreds and thousands and displacing of hundreds and thousands of families, irrespective of what the history is, it will never be justified. It's not justified ever. Saying that and keeping that in mind, let's go back. What we have currently can be dated back to Ottoman Empire, the fall of the Ottoman Empire. Palestine was part of the Great Ottoman Empire, and during the World War One, when the Ottoman Empire fell, Palestine briefly went into the hands of Turkey, which was then seized by the British Empire and the Britain. So it was part of the British Empire. And of course, among many countries in the world, Palestine was also affected by the British Empire, just like India, just like a lot of African countries, most of the Commonwealth countries. Britain feels like that's their land and they can do whatever they want with it. It's their decision on the land, which has never been the case.
As usual.
Yeah, as usual.
Yeah.
In 1917, James Balfour called for the support of the National Home for Jewish People in Palestine.
Yeah.
So this came around the time where like there was increased number of discrimination and crimes against the Jewish community all around Europe.
Yeah.
This was the time where there was the creation of the Jewish diaspora, when the Jewish communities in Europe, like the Sephardic Jews or the Ashkenazi Jews, all of these communities were being kicked out from one country to another, from the other country to another, in terms of like they were trying to find a safe space for themselves, but everywhere they went, the government kicked them out, and which is a very sad, which is an oppression in itself for a community, because they want space. And that's where this all started. Like they want a safe space, and they do have a right to safe space, the Jewish community, yes. So, as usual, Britain thought, yeah, we have this land. It has religious links to the Jewish community. There's not a lot of people. Yeah, there were people. They were just like, okay, there's not a lot of people. There is Jewish communities previously living there as well. And the land is rich in resources. Let's give them the land. So when this happened, this led to the Balfour Declaration, which declared Palestine as a safe space for the Jewish communities. So the Jewish community started moving in. However, in the Balfour Declaration, it was mentioned that any form of immigration to Palestine should not come at the hand of religious or civil rights trampling of the existing Arab community.
Yeah.
But it never mentioned the political rights or any social rights. It was like so carefully curated to focus just on like civil and religious rights. So during the time of this declaration, the population in the Palestine was of Jewish people were 9%. That means like Jewish people existed, and there were a huge population that was still there of Arabs, of other communities, of Phoenicians, of Amazigh, Christians, and Phoenicians were primarily Christians. And because this was declared as a safe space, the Jewish diaspora that existed in Europe had started slowly moving into this region, and the percentage increased to 27% between 1922 and 1935. And then we move on to the darkest time in Europe, one of the darkest times in Europe, and the darkest in Jewish history, the Holocaust. The World War II happened. 6 million Jewish people were sent into concentration camp, killed, displaced, and which increased the idea of, and which really fueled the idea of the need for a safe space of for the Jewish communities.
Mhm.
And because of this, there was a heavy increase in the movement and the immigration of the Jewish communities from all around Europe to this land.
Yeah.
After World War II, because all of Europe was involved in it, European Union was formed as a part of like having a peace between all European countries. European Union formed, the UN uh, was formed, the UN started wanted to make decisions for the safety of so many people who were killed. And because the British had already given land, which was not theirs to give
Mhm.
to the Jewish people before, they were like, okay, let's just declare Palestine and partition Palestine into
Two, two
Israel,
states.
two states, Israel and Palestine. So that was the UN General Assembly resolution of 1947. And the partition happened of Palestine and Israel. That's the formation of, or the early days of the formation of Israel. One very important thing to note is that when this resolution was passing, all the Arabs, all the leaders of the Arab nations walked out on it because they did not agree with this
Mm.
resolution. There's no denying that the Arab countries and the Arab leaders at the time also had personal interest in the regions,
Yeah.
but there were at least some voices, or they were the voices that the Arab communities that were living in Palestine before were like heard of. Like they were the only voices that were at least resonating with the people of Palestine who did not have the say in giving away the land in the first place ever. They were not asked by the British. And post Holocaust, when the Jews came in, they never had a say in like, yeah, we have land to give. So they walked out on it, and they didn't want any part in any of this resolution. But the resolution was still passed, and we and everyone says that like when the resolution was passed, people should have adhered to it. The Arabs should have adhered to it. But you have to look at how it was partitioned. The Israeli land,
Mm.
the land was partitioned in a way that like the land that was given to the Jewish communities, it was all resource rich, all fertile land,
Yeah.
heavily settled, with access to water, electricity, very, very livable land. And the land that was given to the Palestinians or the Arabs, pre-living Arabs and the Palestinians, it was all barren land. You cannot grow crops on it, or like there was not a lot of access to water or like the sea. And of course, like it's your land. The Palestinians have been living there, and after like an international resolution, you're been cut off from resources at all. Of course, you would not want that resolution. You would not agree to that resolution, or like be part of it, or would not agree to that partition. And the only voice that the Palestinians had at that time was the Arab leaders from other countries at the point, which led to the Israel-Arab War
Yeah.
of 1948, where Israel was backed by Europe and the US and the Arab Union, and which led to Israel winning the war because
They
of
were back there.
this backed resources and artillery and weapons. And in 91, because of this, they ended up with more land than the resolution, and
Mm.
they conquered more land, they occupied more land, they occupied Gaza, West Bank, East Jerusalem, all of these regions, which were internationally in the resolution supposed to be with Palestine.
With Palestine.
Yes. So this is where they broke the first resolution ever in history of Israel, that they just did not listen to the land that they were given to.
Mm.
And because of all of these tensions arose much more in the region, and uh, it fueled further the idea of nationalism among the Jewish community, and led to the rise, more and more and more and more rise of
Extreme
Zionism,
Zionism.
ex- Zionism, and led to the Nakba, which is the catastrophe, and there were like more than 750,000 families displaced,
Hmm.
and a lot of those families were killed. And among those families, people forget to address this. Among those families, there were at least among 750,000 families, there was at least 125 families that were Jewish families.
Hmm. Hmm.
And if if this movement was in any way about the safety
Jewish.
of the Jewish communities, which is very important, I will keep reiterating it.
Hmm.
It's very important. It for a safe way for the Jewish community. It's not true. That's not the motive
Hmm.
of Israel. That motive was lost because
Hmm.
of
Hmm.
this. Started the Western interest, the Western influence, the European influence in the region, and with the Nakba came a lot of other things, and the formation of PLO,
Hmm.
which is the Palestinian Liberation Organization,
Hmm.
which was led by Yasser Arafat.
Hmm.
And this was the first political organization or political resistance that existed in from Palestine. And these were more like, initially started off as more of a peaceful and diplomatic political resistance, and of course, naturally, they had to take up arms. And it was getting a lot of traction in the UN, in a lot of other things, and it could potentially lead to a successful resistance. So they needed to destabilize it.
Hmm.
And a lot of people within the Palestinian communities were getting frustrated with the PLO as well, because like all of their efforts were being futile, and people were thinking like they're not taking extreme enough measures for the
Hmm.
liberation of Palestine. So there was like people like, okay, maybe we need something else. And then the international community kind of tapped onto that,
Hmm.
and that's when the creation of Hamas happened. And Hamas
Hmm.
was built out of, this was around the time of the first Intifada as well, when the first
Hmm.
resistance
Hmm.
happened.
Yeah.
And Hamas was formed, and this Hamas was formed more in order to cater to those extreme ideologies of using a lot more force
Hmm.
than the PLO. And Hamas was funded by Israel. And it's not like I'm not making this up. When Hamas was formed, there is evidence and there is confessions from a lot of Israeli leaders at the time that they were funding Hamas so that there's destabilization in the region of PLO, and there is a shift
Hmm.
from the people's support of the PLO. But that backfired, and
Themselves.
Hamas on themselves, and Hamas became this really big influence, especially in Gaza. Look at, like,
Hmm.
there were activities uh, from Hamas in the West Bank and East Quds as well, but they were primarily located in Gaza, and it backfired because then they started attacking Israel,
Hmm.
and and then that became the Hamas movement or the resistance movement. Uh, and all of these things culminated and happened again and again and again and again and again. Uh, and this is where we are today
Hmm.
because of all of that. There is very little influence of, there are three regions in Palestine: West Bank, East Jerusalem, and
Hmm.
Gaza.
Gaza.
All these three regions are under Israeli control, and occupation. People will say that West Bank has its own government, Palestinian Authority, but the Palestinian Authority is under the control
Of
and
Israel
under
themselves.
of Israel's themselves, and there is like it's known that that's how they function. Gaza, Hamas was elected in 2005 to be the political power there. So yes, Hamas has been there, but that was the last and the first election they have in 2005. They haven't had any election since then. They haven't been allowed to have any elections since then because all of their resources, all of their things, and everything has been controlled by Israel. In 2005, people say, "Oh, but Israel withdrew from Gaza." Israel withdrew their forces and their settlements from inside of Gaza and relocated themselves in the perimeter. So whether the control is from the inside or the outside, the Gaza is still in control
Control.
of Israel.
Because that's why it's called an open prison, or let's say concentration camp. That's how we address it. So
Yes,
because it's in control of Israel itself.
it is in control of Israel. Israel controls what goes in, Israel controls what goes out, who goes in, who goes out. Uh, Under international law, the people from Gaza are allowed to go fishing at least 20 miles, but they're allowed only 3 miles. That is another, like all
International
of these things.
breaking
So
of international
there's an
laws.
occupation whose motives are occupying the land, using the resources of the land for Western interests, and it's a white supremacy movement, believe it or not, which is weaponizing and has weaponized the plight of the Jewish communities and the need for a safe space for the Jewish communities against a community which has nothing to do with it. And because of all that oppression, because of displacement of millions of people, thousands of people, killing of thousands of people, there is, of course, naturally, it gives rise to different kind of ideologies of resistance, which gives rise to PLO, gives rise to Palestinian Jihad, gives rise to Hamas. You call them a terrorist organization, or you don't call them an armed resistance, or you call them a terrorist organization. We can debate the semantics back and forth for ages. But the fact that Hamas exists is a result of something. You cannot cure Hamas without curing what caused Hamas.
Yeah.
So we cannot start every single conversation about this with
With
Hamas. We
Hamas.
have to go before Hamas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you talked about Hamas, and you said that people used to call Hamas as a terrorist organization, and the way it actually operated, and the way it actually attacked Israel on October 7th was actually evident for people that they can actually call Hamas as a terrorist organization, because somehow, or because of stats, that they killed around 1,500, 1,300 people, Israelis, who were civilians and non-combatants. So let's discuss what exactly happened on October 7th, and the narrative that we hear from the Israeli side, that civilians were killed, there was an attack on the festival, and non-combatants were killed there. So if Hamas, the way Hamas acted and how they acted, what was their way of acting, and if they acted violently, then what was the right step to actually fight against Israel, which is a very big, which is heavily funded, and which is one of the strongest military forces in the world. So how should Hamas actually attack and fight Israel in a very pure way?
Again, we come to that kind of like ideology that like everything that we fight, any we should fight in a way that the oppressor is comfortable. How does that make sense? An oppressed community is trying to breathe, and they can only be allowed to breathe the way the oppressor wants them to breathe. How does that make sense? You look at the history of any kind of revolution in the world, Nat Turner Revolution, the Haitian Revolution. Look at the Caribbean history and the slave revolutions that happened around the world, Indian Revolution, or the African National Congress, the ANC in South Africa. The methods that were used were initially violent. Why? The Black Panther Party, or the Malcolm, like all the Muslim, the Brotherhood, the Black Brotherhood by Malcolm X. All of these movements. Why did there have to be any form of revolution that you talk about, and any revolution you take in history has had both non-violent and violent elements to them, which are connected to each other and have their own place in the whole fight. Yeah.
One must argue that that okay, they can act actually violently, but why not attack the government organizations and the government and the people of government themselves? And why did they not do that, and they actually attacked the civilians and a festival, definitely a festival where actually civilians were killed?
So they did attack primarily military targets.
Hmm.
And again, we are not here to focus on what methods they applied. Yes, we can agree or disagree on the methods that were there. Yeah, that the
Yeah.
methods that they employed to do so. The important aspect of it all is, why did they have to do that?
Yeah.
What led up to this? Why did they feel the need to do that? You
Yeah.
have to ask that question.
Yeah.
When you've suffocated a cause or a set of people out of every single resource that they have, or every single outlet that they have to talk. You've killed people in peaceful protests in 2018 on the borders of
Mm.
Gaza.
Yeah.
You've arrested activists all around the world under anti-Semitism
Mm.
when they talk about when they talk about for the Palestinian cause. You've removed or sanctioned every form of international support for Palestine. You
Mm.
have vetoed any resolution that has been brought up in in the UN gatherings for the peace in nation, for in the region, for Palestinian rights, for Palestinian human rights. You've literally suffocated them from every single outlet. You've tried to brand the BDS movement as an anti-Semitic movement. You've suppressed every single Palestinian voice. So when you've suffocated them completely out of their non-violent approaches or non-violent outlets, they have nowhere to go. They have nothing to do. They have, like, what do they resort to?
Mm.
So a group that was formed on the ideology of using extensive force, you cannot put morality into that.
Mm.
When the fact, when the whole premise on how they were formed was immoral,
Yeah.
you cannot expect morality on that. You do not come from a position, or you coming from a privilege of a position where you've never been through that, and you're saying that they're immoral.
Mm.
I don't understand the high ground that we come from when we say that.
Mm. Yeah.
The focus should not be their acts. The fact that they had to resort to that. Why
Mm.
did they have to resort to that? Why did they have to attack civilians? Why? What made them feel like that? Why
Mm.
did they have to resort to it? Again, it's not like we do not sympathize with the loss of civilians on the Israeli side.
Mm.
Yeah. It's that we do not sympathize with them the way the West wants us to. West wants us to sympathize with them by putting down the Palestinian cause, calling Hamas terrorists again and again and again and again and again and again, calling the PLO terrorists, calling the Islamic Jihad terrorists, and just putting down the Palestinian cause. That's how the West wants us to sympathize with the losses in Israel. That's not how we sympathize with them. We sympathize with them, yes. You come from a Jewish community. Yes. You come from a history of being kicked out of your houses all over Europe. We understand your plight because we've been kicked out as well. Yes. You came here under the false sense of security given to you by your government. Your government said, you've been kicked out all over the world. You're not accepted all over the world. This is your safe space. They gave you a land which was not yours with the false pretense that you will be safe here, without telling you that this space
Is actually
is
not
taking
yours.
from a lot of people, and this space is oppressing a bunch of people who could retaliate. And they have all the right to retaliate. So you've given this false sense of security, and because of that, they have suffered these consequences, which they didn't have to. They have places to go back to. They have places where they come from, where they came from, where they might have been relatively safer than here. Yet, you pushed your agenda, you pushed your supremacist ideology, you tapped onto their nationalistic ideologies, brought them here under the false pretense of safety, and now they're dead. So the fact that there's loss on the Israeli side, there would be no loss on the Israeli side. There would be no loss of the Jewish communities if the false, secure state of Israel didn't exist. And the question, and the people questioning the existence of Israel is not them questioning a safe space for the Jewish communities. The Jewish diaspora was not created by the Arabs or by the Palestinians. The Jewish diaspora was created by the Europeans. So Europeans cannot forward that responsibility or taking care of that responsibility to the Arabs.
To other Arabs, definitely.
Give Arabs back their rights, their land, their safe space, and then create a safe space for these Jewish communities that have been suffering for ages
Within
in
that
your land, in their land, from where they came from, or from where they originally originated from. The land was not yours to give. The land was under illegal occupation. You cannot call it being the British Empire, under the British Empire, as it being a legal colony. No. It was a product of colonization. It was not your land to give with in the first place. It was Palestinians living there. And you were taking their land from them anyway, and then you imposed this on them because you couldn't deal with it in your place. And now it's somehow the Palestinians' responsibility to take care of the Jewish diaspora. Make it make sense.
It doesn't make sense. So let's move on. Okay, so Hamas all over the world is called a terrorist organization, and there are few countries who don't recognize Hamas as a terrorist organization. But whereas where we see Hamas, which actually retaliates in defense of its land and is actually trying to defend its land, take back its land. Whereas on the other hand, if we see there's another part where we can see that the war is going on. It is known as Russian and Ukraine war, where Russia actually invaded Ukraine, and when Ukraine actually retaliated, their kids went with stones and went with handmade bombs and those bottle bombs, and various other, they used various other equipments to actually fight back the Russian troops. They were called the heroes. They were called the freedom fighters. Whereas if we see in India itself, we can see that Bhagat Singh was one of the freedom fighters in India who was regarded as by the British as terrorist, and as the one who killed people and who was violent by himself. So now they are considered as freedom fighters. Now they are considered as heroes. But why not Hamas? Why is it that only Hamas and other organizations, especially Arab and Muslim organizations who fight back, who retaliate, who defend, are called as a terrorist organization, and not the Ukrainian troops, and not the Ukrainian people, and not even the Indian freedom fighters? Is it because of the racial discrimination,
Yes, it
or
is.
because stereotyping? What is it?
It is racial discrimination. So, in dictionary or in any in a, if you look up the definition of terrorism is use of force and violent methods against civilian populations, not necessarily military targets, in order to destabilize the location and the politicians and the political area for political interests. Now, if you look at this definition, there's no bigger terrorist organization in the world than the US.
Definitely.
Or there was no biggest terrorist organization in the world like the British Empire. So when the British Empire controlled the narratives of the world, let's say, Bhagat Singh was a terrorist.
Yeah.
But now that India is free, they are
He's regarded
heroes.
as a freedom fighter.
They are heroes.
Yeah.
Nelson Mandela and his wife, Winnie Mandela. Winnie Mandela was a very violent person, by the way. People don't talk about Winnie Mandela, but Winnie Mandela's methods were quite violent for the fight against apartheid.
Yeah.
And she played a very, very, very important role in the fight for the apartheid. And the image of Nelson Mandela that we see today, it's extremely whitewashed. We do not talk, or we do not see or learn or even read about his involvement with the American African National Congress, and how he initially was peaceful, but then he had to resort to armed resistances as well. When that happened, the whole African National Congress, the whole ANC movement against apartheid, was considered what? A terrorist organization. Nelson Mandela received his Peace Prize before he could be taken off of the terrorist watch list. Nelson Mandela was taken off of the terrorist watch list in 2018.
2018.
Yes, 2008 or 2018, but doesn't matter.
Doesn't
That was
matter. That's true.
way past apartheid. So this is the thing. When French Revolution happens, or when the Ukrainian Revolution resistance happens, that's armed resistance, not terrorism. Why? Because it's white.
It white. Yeah.
It's for imperialist interests. But when there is a force against imperialism, against Western hegemony, using violence against Western hegemony, Western forces, imperialism, it's terrorism. That's not white. So the world has ingrained in our head again and again and again and again with its Western narratives that terrorism comes from only a certain set of group, when what they're doing is at much lower level what the Western country has been doing and has been known fully in public, been known to do a lot of other countries.
The Nagasaki issue is one of the most evident issues.
Yes, but that is, we can describe that as terrorism, yes. But that's difficult to argue because it was part of a huge war going along, and Nothing justifies dropping two sons on a land. Nothing justifies that.
Matter of fact, one of the Israeli ministers actually recommended or advised the government to actually nuke the Gaza city,
Opened the
just like
option.
the Hiroshima and
So
Nagasaki was nuked.
yeah, that has always been an option. If Palestine and the Palestinian population, if Gaza wasn't so close to the Israeli settlements,
Yeah,
that like any nuclear attack on them would not affect the Israeli settlements around, they would do it.
definitely they would have
Without a
done,
doubt, they would do it. They're just
because
scared that the consequence would come on Israelis
yeah,
as well.
because the bomb blasts that they have done and the missile launches that they have done till now, it actually accounts to
Much
one
more
fourth
than
or
that
one
now.
fifth
If
of
we if we
the nuclear attack.
yeah, if we consider now, like I think it's almost equal.
Mm.
Almost equal.
Just that it's done in installments.
Yes. Yeah.
So okay, let's move on. There's a very common argument within the Jews and within especially within the Zionists and is especially the Israeli supporters, that Jews are actually the natives of that country. Now, why they think so, why they say that the Jews are the native of Palestine, they go back to the time of Moses, and they go back to the time of let's say Joseph and Jacob, and they go that back, and then they say that that this land was actually originally a Hebrew land, or let's say a Jewish land. So what's kind of a rebuttal to this argument?
I am no expert in Jewish theology or Jewish history, but I know that Zionist history and the Zionist retelling of Jewish history is different from a lot of Jewish people around the world. So let's not associate both of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. There are Jewish communities all around the world, as we saw in the protests in Washington yesterday.
Yeah.
And today, I think. And there is Jewish communities all around the world that are anti-Zionist. There are Jewish communities in Palestine for Palestine who are against Zionism. So we do not have to mention Judaism here. We have to focus on Zionism. Jewish people, Jewish communities have suffered a lot throughout the world. They deserve a safe space. Zionism is not that movement.
Yeah.
Zionism is not a safe space movement. No. Zionism is a supremacy movement, and it perpetuates this idea that your religion, your religious identity, is your ethnic identity.
Mm.
Yeah, irrespective that your genetic ancestry or ethnicity is in Europe, the fact that you're Jewish, you're native
To that land.
to the land.
Mm.
Judaism did come out of
From Palestine.
Palestine.
So did
Yes.
the
So
Christianity.
did Christianity. Yeah. If we consider Islam, so did Islam, because Imam Hazrat Ibrahim or Prophet Abraham was in Palestine,
was
moved to
actually
Palestine from
was
Iraq.
actually the resident of Hijaz, and he was actually Arab.
Yes, he was an Arab. So all of these Abrahamic religions came out of Palestine. So all of us, with the logic that like it's an ethno religion. If we consider every religion as an ethno religion, and if we constitute our ethnicity to our religious identity, all of us belong to Palestine then. Can I go take any land there?
No.
No.
Hmm. Definitely, yes.
When we look
That's true.
at the genetic history of the land, we see the ancient Canaans. That was the
Canaanite.
land before it was called Palestine. The Canaanites. When we look at that ancestry and that genetic makeup exists in modern Palestinian population, modern Lebanese population, a little bit of Egyptian population, some Jordanians, and the Mizrahi Jews, which have been around, which are the Middle Eastern Jews.
Levant, most probably.
Yes, in Levant as well, yeah.
Mm.
But the Jewish communities that existed in Europe, which moved, or in America as well, in the Western world, they're all white.
Mm.
They have European history. They have European ethnicity.
Yeah.
But Zionism, people who are under Zionism or who follow Zionism, have been made to believe that despite their European ethnicity or European ancestry and having no ancestral connection or genetic connection or ethnic connection to the land, just the fact that they are part of Judaism per se, they have a right and connection to the land, and that's where they ethnically belong to, which is wrong. Any form of religious claim over a land that disputes with actual ancestry of the land and comes at a cost of other communities which have had ancestral claim as well as religious claim of the land is not a valid claim of the land.
Yeah. There's another argument. Let's move on to, let's just speed up a little bit. There's another argument which they say, and they kind of show that they actually are sympathizing with the Palestinian civilians, and they say that the Hamas actually uses the Palestinian civilians as a human shield, and they justify that. They say that the within the hospitals there are arms and there are ammunitions, and the hospital itself is a military base for Hamas, and they use the same for the residents, and they say that the Hamas is actually using the civilians as a human shield, and that is why they say that while attacking Hamas there's a collateral damage, and they say that this 10,000 people that are killed till now are a part of collateral damage.
Uh, the IDF headquarters in Jaffa or Tel Aviv uh, is between settlements, Israeli settlers, and Israeli
Wow.
population.
Yeah.
Are they using human shields? Would you say the IDF is using Israelis as human shields?
Never.
Okay, let's focus on Hamas. If Hamas, if it turns out Hamas has a secret base in Israel, in what is known as Israel,
Yeah.
would Israel use the same tactics?
Never.
Never. They would not do that.
Mm.
It's just pure gaslighting when they say that they're using everyone as human shields, everyone as human shields. No, no Palestinian or no person in Gaza who's been talked to or has ever reported that they have been used by Hamas. 45% of them are children. They don't know what's happening. That's
They
all
don't
they.
even know what's Hamas.
Yeah, they might even not. They would know what's Hamas, but like they don't know what's happening. They didn't bring Hamas to power. That this is all they know. And if someone is using, okay, let's give them the benefit of the doubt. They're using them as human shields. How is going through the human a moral thing to do? Huh? Tomorrow, like a murderer comes into your house, takes your mom a hostage, and points a gun at on her head,
Kill your mom.
and says that like, I will kill your mom.
Mm.
Would you just go through the mom? Like my mom is a collateral damage. I need to get to the murderer.
Hmm.
Is that moral? Is that logical? Does that make sense? No. You are backed by the biggest army in the world. You have one of the most heavily funded armies in the world. Yeah. You have the most ruthless secret intelligence in the world, Mossad. You
You have
have the
Iron
capability.
Dome.
You have the Iron Dome. You have so much technology to do precision attacks, to do precision activities, to specifically target Hamas and properly control any form of collateral human damage. And yet you choose to bomb the whole thing without even reporting that any Hamas member was killed. If there was, you would proudly report it. Oh, that Hamas member, that was the person that died. That was a Hamas member. Out of 10,000 people who have died up until today, how many of them have they mentioned are Hamas members?
Not even single one. I
Yeah.
haven't heard. Not even single one.
Are you so inefficient that killing 10,000 people, you haven't been able to kill one Hamas? What kind of operation is this? All 10,000 people are human shields? That's the best shield in the world. You shot a car. You shot a car in Lebanon, southern Lebanon. Whole family died, which just consisted of women, and said that was Hamas.
Three children. Three
Three
women children.
children. There's no Hamas there in the car. Bombed a ambulance yesterday, used by Hamas operators. There was only medical operators inside and two wounded patients. One of them was a kid.
Matter
What
of fact,
what
what? Yeah,
what
yeah.
human shield is this? And the fact
Matter
that
of
people fall into these gaslighting techniques is just see how people are just willing to accept a narrative because it's coming from a white person.
hmm.
That's the problem.
Matter of fact, I heard an Israeli citizen and a civilian, who just recently moved away from Israel and stopped living there, and her family is currently living in Israel. She says that when she actually goes to West Bank, and she sees that the types of walls and the type of surveillance that is there, that she says that the cameras that are there, the cameras that are implanted there, can actually look into the houses of people, can look inside the houses of people, and what exactly they are doing. Even individual by individual, they can see what the person is doing. Now, when they have such a technology in West Bank, can't they have such a technology in Gaza?
Uh, that's besides the point, really. Like, even if they do, even if they don't, they can have it, they cannot have it, but that's still not like any form of justification. Talking about West Bank, there's no Hamas in West Bank. There is some armed resistance like the Qassam brigades in Jenin, but that's it. No, none in Khalil, none in Nablus, no one in Ramallah.
Still
What are
they
they like? Are people dying there? What are the human shields of then? Why are settlers being given guns to open fire on the Palestinian community? Why are they constantly being killed? 237 in West Bank killed before
this month,
October 7th.
before
Before
October
October
7th.
7th. Yes.
This month were also
This
many
month
killed
more
in
than
this month.
100.
And it's a story of every month. The whole
Those are
year
those
they
are
actually kill
shields
West
of
Bank.
whom? Which like Qassam brigades are only restricted in Jenin. What about Khalil? What about Ramallah? What about Nablus?
Hmm.
What are the human shields of?
So
It's
among
like questions people just don't like. even bother to ask and just blindly accept. That's why it's important that we spread information, do podcasts like this, and spread information. Try to ask these questions which we shouldn't be asking, because we know which the people who have fallen to the propaganda of the West, they should be asking these questions. But we are asking this for them, so that it can get into their head that they're being programmed, that they're being fed lies, so that they can control the narrative of what's going on.
So among this conflict, what is the what is actually being shared within the Muslim community is the betrayal of Arab countries. None of the Arab countries, apart from, and matter of fact, Iran is not an Arab country, but it's there in Middle East. Apart from Lebanon, apart from Yemen, and apart from uh, Iran, none of the Arab countries are actually implementing on what they are actually saying. They are threatening that they will do many things, they will take many actions, but they are not actually implementing it. Turkey, on the other hand, is just saying, and is just not actually implementing on its own words. It says that the Erdogan actually says many things. He threatens with many with many things, but he never implements on it. So this is a kind of Arab betrayal to the Palestinians. What do you think about it?
So I have I have had the fortune of meeting multiple Palestinians here. I have Palestinian friends in Bethlehem and in Khalil, and we've talked about this and how the Arab world has turned their back against their own people, against their own community, and it all comes back to capitalistic interests. How majority of the Gulf, the GCC, having extensive resources and a huge amount of money, is still not helping, because they are puppets of Western interests. They want money, they cannot lose their money. They want to keep going with their ventures of gaining more money, padding the bottom line of Western interests. All of those things are more important to them than their own cause. And I don't know why, or there's no, like, the money makes people lose morality or any sense of identity, and they would do anything about it for it. Countries like Iran, Lebanon, or even Yemen,
Hezbollah, part of
Hezbollah,
Lebanon. Yeah,
Lebanon, Hezbollah,
yeah.
all these countries are not under imperial interests or any imperial forces or any imperialist control, and have been standing, actually, on the other hand, against any form of imperial interests. So they see this as a fight against imperialism, any kind of imperialist influences in the Middle East. So they fight for it, they fight for the cause, they try to contribute and intervene in the cause. But when you're being controlled by those powers, when you have interests from those powers or deals with those powers, you will not stand against them. And that's why the Arab community, the Arab countries, majority of the Arab countries have just betrayed Palestine and the Palestinian people.
Okay, so you initially in the beginning actually talked about the history, and you talked about 1947 resolution and 1948 Nakba. So there's always a question within the Western anchors and hosts and Western media, that why is it that the Palestinians are, and you have already addressed, but a little bit more addition to those points, why is it that the Palestinians are not agreeing on the fact that let's go back to the two-state nations. Initially, they did, but now they are forcing on the fact that they want the whole land, and they want the whole land to be called a to be called Palestine. Why are they not compromising and just going back to the UN resolution? Even if Israel actually, let's take a hypothetical situation, and let's say that the Israel actually comes to a conclusion, and let's say, okay, let's go back to the UN resolution. Will it be right? Is the two-state solution the right option?
Did it work the first time?
Definitely not. It didn't.
So why do we expect them to give any benefit of the doubt that it will happen the second time?
Yes.
Why are we expecting them to expect that it will work this time? Because we've seen again and again and again and again, in order for Israel to exist, suppression of the Palestinian voices and the oppression and the genocide of the Palestinian people is an essential factor in the existence of Israel and the existence of the Zionist movement. It's a part of the Zionist ideology of eradicating the natives in the land. So that's why there is no two-state solution, because Israel wouldn't exist, because it's not their land. The majority of the people in the land are Arabs, or people associated with the land are Arabs or Palestinians. And and for Israel to exist as Israel, it's important for Israel to suppress Palestinian people. So Israel cannot exist without the oppression of the Palestinian people. Yeah, and if you want to give land back to the Palestinian people, you have to get all of it back.
Yeah.
So that's why the two-state solution is not a viability, because the first time it didn't work. And the second time, we should not expect
That it will work.
the Palestinians to expect it to work, and we do not come from any position to giving them lectures that, like, why are you not expecting it? Why are you not accepting it? Because it did not work the first time. No, Israel did not follow the rules the first time. How do we expect it to work when, like, there is one oppressive entity, and by the two-state solution we would essentially legitimize internationally that oppressive entity and the war crimes that they've done. And we would actually acknowledge that the oppressive movement that they had created was valid and they deserve the land because of it, which would further ensure that the Palestinian people are still oppressed. They would still not be liberated. Two-state solution between India and Pakistan. Did it work?
It didn't.
When has a two-state solution ever worked in any form of any history?
Never. We can see
Some
in
of
the
them,
Russian-Ukraine thing also.
yeah. If some of them seems to be at peace, but there are internal conflicts, civil war, Cold War. They are not in diplomatic conditions. They are not in diplomatic ties. They're still fighting. People are still suffering on the borders of such countries. When has it ever worked? And why do we expect it to work now?
Yeah. So among all of this, we have seen people who are actually pro-Palestinians, and we have seen people who are pro-Israelis, and there's a bunch. There's a bunch of people who are neutral, and we can see the decrease and increase in pro-Palestinians. There's an increase in the pro-Palestinian people, and there is a decrease in the neutral, the people who are neutral, and they are actually moving towards the Palestinian cause. And we can see that the support for Israel within the Israel itself is actually deteriorating and decreasing. But among all of this, the main argument that we actually see from the neutral people, and from those people who are actually neutral and are not taking sides. I had a discussion with one of my friends, one of my batchmates, and he says that because the world is filled with evil, and there's no such thing as black and white. If we see onto the micro level, in the micro level there's no black and white, because on the micro level there's no black and white. Both the sides are wrong, and because both the sides are wrong, we are not in a place to take sides. So what do you want to say to such kind of people who are thinking that there's no black and white and everything is gray shit?
If Holocaust happened today, you would be neutral and you would not say anything. If Holocaust happened today, you would not give Jewish people a safe space. If slavery existed today, you would own slaves.
Mm.
Because you come from a position of privilege that you are able to afford not taking any side because you're not being affected by it. When tens and thousands, hundreds of thousands of people have died on one side, the loss has been disproportionate, extensively disproportionate. You have to question, even if the
100%.
morality is gray, at which side is being oppressed and which is the oppressor. Who needs to be protected? Who needs to deserve human rights? Because at this point, it is about asking for basic human rights, and that's not a morally gray question. People do not have access to water, food. They don't have places to live in. They don't know if they will wake up next day. They don't have families. There are kids. We talk about, oh, these many families have been terminated. Yeah. What about the kids who are at an age that they do not know who they are, and their entire family has been wiped out? They have been like called as unknowns. They would never know who their family was. They would never know what their ancestry is. They would never know what kind of identity, what kind of family they came from. They would not have any identity even if they grew up. When this is one side that's just asking for now for basic human rights, and there is one side that's just keeping on suppressing, killing, endlessly through international support. You cannot keep arguing about the gray morality of the issue.
Mm.
Human rights is not gray. Humanity is not gray.
Mm.
Was the Holocaust gray? Was slavery gray? In the moment, I am pretty sure there were people who would argue, yeah, it's gray. You cannot do anything about it. Oh, slavery is better for the economics. We can't, like, economy is built on slavery. We can't really, if we stop slavery, the economy would be hurt. So we have to maintain some levels of slavery. What kind of an argument is that? And that's the exact person that you would be during the time of transatlantic slavery. You read in the books that what you would, oh, how did they let this happen? You, for by
Let that.
being neutral, let this happen.
It was because of this neutral stance that actually was the reason that Holocaust, such a big thing, actually occurred and happened.
Yeah. And if you cannot acknowledge that, you are extremely complicit. in whatever is going on in the world, and you do not have any kind of moral position to come and judge other people's morality and the methods that other people use, because you've never been through that, you do not understand it, and your moral compass is in a position which gives you no right to judge anyone. And you are complicit, you have blood on your hands.
Yeah, so it was a very great discussion, and we discussed various points. We touched history, the history of the Israel and Palestine issue, and what is actually the true history of the Palestinian land itself. And then we ended it by addressing the neutral stance. We in between actually talked about few arguments. We made few rebuttals for few arguments that is commonly used by the pro-Israeli supporters, or let's say even the neutral ones. They use such arguments. So we had a very great discussion. I thank you to be here with me and discuss on such a crucial and controversial topic, which might even put us on stake, our profession on stake, but it doesn't matter. So let's end this discussion. And we had a great discussion. Thank you for being here. Thank you for taking out the time for me and for the audience. And I also thank the audience to listen to such arguments and enrich themselves so that they can actually be on the right side. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me, and I would like to end on just addressing the thing that you said, that we will be at risk. If when people are putting their lives at risk and dying, what kind of supporters of the cause we are if we can't even risk our jobs or our professions?
Definitely.
We are fake supporters of the cause if we cannot, at the very least, put our jobs at risk when people are dying in hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of numbers. Anyway, thank you for having me. It was a great discussion, and I hope to be able to open more up, have more discussions, open more people's mind to the discussions, to the issues, bring more attraction and spread more awareness about the issue. And I'd be happy to take part in further episodes.
Inshallah, we'll
Inshallah.
be actually inviting you for other events, other episodes, and other sessions too, other, let's say, myth breaker sessions too. Inshallah, let's see. Okay, thank you very much, audience, and thank you very much, viewers, to be here to actually view this episode 1. Stay tuned for episode 2. Thank you.